Hello everyone, another video here on the channel. I ask those who aren't subscribed yet to subscribe and leave a like. If you enjoy the content, share it and feel free to use the comment section as always. Today we're going to talk a bit about the profane feminine and its tentacles, and why do these tentacles reach so far through the dumbing down of men in the face of women's physical, biological, genetic, and hormonal characteristics. Because certain behaviors and even just the presence of women dumb us down so much. And I'm also contributing here to the community, since there are two channels. One is from a great friend whom I always recommend, Coruja do Carvalho. He's doing brilliant work on this. And there's another one I wanted to recommend here for the first time for you all. It's a guy named Yanni Kirigaya. He's been doing an incredible, truly incredible job, especially regarding some scientific articles which highlights this issue of power, this mismatch, this imbalance, this brutal inequality in the gender war between men and women. How we, as men, both him and Kurugia, myself, and other creators, have already noticed this for some time. In fact, anyone who reads in this field, who observes society, has noticed many of these points. Also, that we are much inferior in emotional terms in this is the eternal gender war that's been going on for millions of years. So when faced with the opposite sex, right? So really we were biologically programmed by Mother Nature to be the biggest manginas, betas, and providers possible. And those who use logic, intelligence, who say, hey, wait a minute, let's see how this thing works. I can't be such a bonobo, right? Because we men turn into real chimpanzees, bonobos, baboons, whatever you want to call it, in the presence of females, and above all the most beautiful women, right? And delicate with feminine features. So don't blame yourself for that. Also, don't get into a rage thinking you can be an exception or something like that, because no, this war is really almost impossible to win. Why almost impossible? Because you just have to avoid putting yourself in certain situations where you're going to lose. And here I'm not even advocating for volcanism. As much as I flirt with the idea of volcanism in the long run, it's something I still think I might apply to my life in the future. Who knows? Maybe in the next decade, in the 2030s perhaps. For now, no. But I'm learning a lot, observing society daily to see how these relationships are unequal, how we become paralyzed in the face of feminine power. So that's it. As much as it hurts to say this, as much as it hurts to hear it, we have to accept our fragile condition in relation to women. So that's it, and some women know how to work with this very well, which is where I want to talk here specifically in today's video about OnlyFans, this platform, and go a bit through the chronological evolution of social networks, even how we got to OnlyFans and this ability women have to monetize with it. It's funny, before I get into it, something curious happened this week actually, that I was listening to a new video by Coruja do Carvalho where he talked about how women make men dumb. This is something that even the blue pills know, you know? Even at a bar table full of simps, those guys who don't know anything, they'll say, oh man, when a certain woman shows up, everyone gets kind of dumb, the conversation ends and all that. So even Google, right? It shows you that, in fact, there are several studies, even in the mainstream, that show men get flustered, they get dazed, kind of dumb and all that. They really get dizzy when there's a beautiful woman in the room. Actually, she doesn't even have to be that pretty. As long as she's not a dragon, no matter what the guy looks like, even a dragon can make a guy feel awkward. So I was at the gym this week, and I switched gyms this year in 2022. I spent a long time at the gym I used to go to until last year, but I wanted a change of scenery and all that. This new gym is closer to my house. It's the same price. The average price for gyms in big cities in Brazil. Anyway, it has a lot of good equipment. It's well ventilated. It's really good. But there are way more beautiful women here than there were at my old gym, right? And I was there doing cardio, grinding through Karuha's video. You always have to be grinding, staying focused. Man, there are beautiful women everywhere you look at the gym. If you glance to the side, bro, you miss 30 or 40 seconds of what Karuha said. You have to go back and listen again. So, like, it's something much stronger than us. And even Karuha himself says that not even he plays with fire, because that's something really hard to overcome. He doesn't put himself in those situations. In other words, even the greatest intellectuals in our field, they don't put themselves in situations where there's a risk of losing focus or blowing a negotiation. Uncle Miktal used to say this back when he worked in engineering and had a client who was really, really beautiful. He had a strategy for that, although it was a bit contradictory. Yeah, I think I'll see if I can find that video later to share with you guys. But anyway, he would, take care of himself before seeing the woman, because otherwise he'd go crazy. The woman would end up asking for a discount and he would give it. Even him, who's pretty experienced in this, sometimes the guy gets flustered, So, like, In theory, there will always be some guy who comments, "Oh, I don't think Amar Gorobito is all that. Oh, she's just average. Oh, that woman is overrated." So in YouTube comments, there's always that, but it's a minority, okay? But on every channel, there's always someone who'll say, "No, I'm immune to women." The guy gets with a woman who's a symbol of beauty, and says he doesn't think she's all that. But in the guy's real life, any girl who's a 4.5 or 5 wearing a short outfit, the guy already he gives in completely. So let's just accept this condition of vulnerability. So when it comes to our hormones, our libido, and not just be half-hearted about it and try to do some damage control. That's it. So now specifically talking about how things ended up on OnlyFans. First, you need to lay out a timeline of how female behavior has evolved on social media. Okay? Let's look at the internet as a whole, because if you look at cyberscript, the people who I never got to use ICQ. I was still just a kid playing Pokemon Red with my cousins, and I never really used ICQ. I saw an older cousin of mine use it, but I barely used it myself. But I did use Mark a lot, and later on I wanted Cyberscript, right? Which was the provider I used. In this case, the software I used. And then I moved on to MSN, Orkut, and then Facebook. Yeah, and alongside that, Twitter, Instagram, and Fitus, which you already know. But if you look at the very beginnings, even in the late 90s and the turn of the millennium, at the end of the 90s and early 2000s, it's like how they didn't sleep before MSN to go viral, which everyone already knows about, but female behavior has always been shrouded in mystery. Because back then, there wasn't even a profile picture, like on MSN, for example. There was no webcam, nothing. It was just a basic messenger. You know those screens that kind of look like the ones you see when hackers are talking to each other in movies, right? So it was a very minimalist thing, and it worked really well. In fact, the server, the micro, the brain, it was all written out, guys. People would even put a bunch of anime and series episodes there to download, and the channels too. And then there were the moderators, the others, not the operators, the OPs, the voices, right, who were kind of like the OPs suck ups, who were the guy who was there to assist anyway. Good times, those were good days on the internet. Yeah, right. So the presence of women always stirred things up a bit, especially in more niche communities. Well, actually, channels, right? Back then, we called them channels, not groups. The more niche channels, whether for anime or soccer, there were channels for all sorts of soccer teams. When a woman showed up, sometimes there'd be a group of 20 guys and one or two women would join, and everything would kind of change. So even in virtual environments, the presence of women would already cause a certain change in the atmosphere itself. Always remember, stimuli and rewards are thrown into the environment. So many times in the private chats of those older messengers, you had to upload a photo. Digital cameras were very rare back then. They were still very scarce, very exclusive in Brazil, and you'd have to send a link there to image check, an image ban or something like that, right? So it was very common to either send, or there was also the option to send the file itself, a JPEG, right? So that's how it happened. It was very common for men to be there imagining things, just lingering. It's beta behavior, as I always say, right? Not just me, but other content creators say it too. Male thirst is infinite. When guys saw a woman in the group, they would go crazy. There was always that thing where the guy would get super curious to see what the woman looked like, to see her face. So it's funny, because with MSN you had a revolution, a real revolution, both in terms of aesthetics and design, as well as with the abundance of new features and tools. MSN itself already brought the option to send emojis, which at the time were called emoticons, not emojis. Today that's more of a WhatsApp or smartphone thing. And also the fact that you could change the font according to the color, the style, the pattern. And then there was the webcam thing too. You could say the webcam was the prelude to OnlyFans. Because many women there, through chats, like for example the UOL chat, where there were a lot of adult chats on UOL, where you would get a woman's MSN, and well, there would end up being that kind of exhibitionism. And a lot of times it happened for free, okay? I know there were women who charged for it back then and all, but at that time there was no Pix, there weren't any electronic payment methods yet. I'm talking about 2003, 2004, okay? At that time, to buy something on Mercado Libre, you had to work out the payment method directly with the seller. And the Mercado Libre ads were all colorful with huge fonts. It was just brutal spam, like a massive flood that people would do there. So it was a thing. The internet was much darker back then, you know? Much more, it was primitive, much more kind of very manual, but also analog, you know? It was something that just didn't have that much automation. So women would often take advantage of it for ego validation because a woman wasn't going to wait for a guy to go to the bank and make a transfer. Brazilians were still very suspicious of internet banking at the time. And with Ted, Doc waiting for the payment to clear and all that. So the woman, because she got that ego boost from seeing a guy crazy about her, that's a biological concept of females. That's when it's been in their genes for 2 million years. This thing about wanting to see a man wrapped around their finger, wanting to see a man acting foolish for them. That's why they often survive wars, invasions, barbarian attacks, and so on. They survived in this case, right? Because men, through neotenic resources and psychological self defense, end up making women more powerful than men. Because by exuding a certain fragility and evoking, it reminds many men of their childhood, and that's where that comes in a bit. Freudian, but this is pure biology. This is neoteny. I've already made a video about neoteny. Kuru has talked about it too anyway. Esther Viller is an expert in this, in exposing this female behavior through neoteny in the tamed man. So what happens is that the men there would keep complimenting the women. They would, as they say abroad, be simps. They would just be pandering and complimenting, sometimes even with twisted words. Anyway, the women there, their fun was being worshipped by several men who were after some quick pleasure on the internet. So then you move on to Orkut. Orkut is already a bit different because now you have that social network aspect, right? Just to remind you, I'm talking about Brazil here, okay? Because Orkut really only caught on in Brazil and India. Other countries didn't really use it much. So Orkut came with that thing where you could upload 12 photos, right? So through your profile, you could send scraps, testimonials. So at that point, women started to loosen up a bit more there, right? Because it was actually a social network that really blew up in Brazil between 2004 and 2009, which was its peak, right? Then after 2010, 11, 12, Facebook came along and pretty much destroyed Orkut in Brazil. But on Orkut, women were still very reserved. Anyone who lives in a small town knows what I'm talking about, okay? And when I say small town, I mean up to 500,000 inhabitants, okay? This even happened in big cities like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. It also happened in small social circles there. But in the countryside, right? I know that's much more because I have a lot of friends who live in the countryside of Brazil. And that's something people talk about a lot more there, right? As they say over there. Man, if a woman posted a photo in a thong on Orkut, it would be the talk of the town for the whole month. Like, it was something that was really uncommon. The girls would post bikini photos and stuff like that. The photos they were simpler, more youthful, more innocent, sort of. Let's put it that way, because there was Fotolog and Flowground too, right? Which I ended up forgetting to mention, but it was happening at the same time. You had that there. There were photos, but like in front of the mirror and stuff. Yeah. There were very few cosmetic procedures. Photoshop effects were more of a Corel Draw thing, like only experts knew how to use it. There were no filters or anything, so it was much less sensual on those social networks, even though on MSN, right? Lasciviousness, lust was already running wild there, right? So like the sexual fooling around was already happening openly on MSN for a long time. But not on those social networks, right? Because it was all about showing yourself to society, showing yourself to the community, showing yourself to the circle of people you had. So whether it was on Flowground, Fotolog, or Orkut, back when you could only have 12 photos, you didn't see that many pictures of women there. And celebrities in general didn't have Orkut, right? There was no Orkut. Orkut and not even Facebook. Facebook came later. Then women started posting some more sensual photos, which Facebook already noticed. A more modern tone, like with smartphones, is that it's a global reach. Then some celebrities even had pages, but not profiles, right? So with Facebook, it already starts to show a preview that this could be monetized one day. That's when this thing starts, with women getting 1,000 likes, 2,000 likes on bikini photos, something unimaginable. Because at the time, even though Orkut didn't have likes, if a photo of a pretty, somewhat famous girl got 20 comments, 30 comments, when Orkut opened up comments, that was already a lot. So there's just no comparison from Orkut to Facebook. There's a huge gap. But the even bigger gap comes with Instagram. The gap from Facebook to Instagram is even greater. Because what happened there, a milestone that was very beneficial for women, was that they could monetize their bodies and learn how to make money. With that, without having to resort to pornography or relationships with men and all that, it was Instagram. Instagram is the main driving force behind what would become OnlyFans. So what you end up having in that gap, because what was very beneficial for women, a major milestone, was the political polarization in Brazil. If you combine the protests of 2000 and June 2013 with the Dilma Aécio election was a perfect opportunity. At that point, it was like, I'm done with politics. I've argued too much. I don't talk to my cousin anymore because of political labels like communist or fascist. And it ended up turning into this political bickering, and everyone moved to Instagram. So the death of Facebook also comes with the boomerization of social networks. The boomers, they only caught the end of Orkut. There were even some boomers on Orkut, but on Facebook they started joining en masse because it was through smartphones. Boomers started using WhatsApp and Facebook, so a lot of Facebook ended up turning into a political battleground, and it still is today, right? It still is. So Instagram was the perfect opportunity. It's funny, right? How it's kind of like a cycle. You can't analyze these things in a linear way. You go to a tool that was minimalist like Marcy, and then after Marcy, you move to MSN, which is already more, and a tool that's more about showing off. Compared to Marcy, right? With more features. Then you go to Orkut, which compared to Facebook is minimalist. Then you move to Facebook, which has way more features, and then you go to Instagram. At first, Instagram is very minimalist, really just for posting photos and nothing else. Then, when the whole stories thing starts, that's when things get complicated, right? That's when things get complicated. And then all the celebrities are on various Instagrams out there. Because from the moment celebrities start posting those really Chad guys or the influencers who are like tactical agents, then in this psychological warfare, they start posting their routines, their lives, and that's when things start to go downhill. So, like, it's very likely that the pretty girl from your town has already hooked up with some famous guy, a top tier soccer player, a global actor, a famous country singer, you know? That's really common nowadays because they have access, right? I'm going to make a video just talking about how screwed Generation Z is, you know, those girls born from 2000 onwards. So, thank you. Any 20-year-old girl from the countryside from western Santa Catarina is already being taken to Sao Paulo these days. There to hang out with super chat guys, with famous YouTubers, with soccer players, singers, with those kinds of guys. Those who are going to suffer the most from hypergamy and sexual scarcity will be Generation Z. So stay tuned for the video I'm preparing about Generation Z. So from the moment you see women, you look on Instagram, a bunch of average ones. You start to see that there are the beauty clinic procedures, filter procedures, and male thirst. On Instagram, there's an endless supply of every kind of hottie. Then, as soon as they start posting bikini photos, even any average girl in a thong already has 50,000 followers, 2,000 likes on her photos. Women start to see their role there, but it's too much. There are so many guys calling me beautiful over there. Even though only compliments from the guys matter to them, like I said in the video, in the end, women's self-esteem is low. So, even though they get this constant ego validation, only compliments from the right guy matter to them. You saw it on Big Brother. People asked me to comment, and it happened. It was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. That girl there got rejected by Shady. She threw a fit, started crying. So in the end, only Shady's validation really matters. But Instagram showed them that it's possible to make money in some way with this right here. So they don't need to resort to prostitution. They don't need to go to Los Angeles to make porn movies. They don't need to do any of that. So there's no need to do brasileirinhas or anything like that. Of course, some will realize that in fact you can make money really fast with this hybrid lifestyle, being both an escort and a regular person, and they're going to do that. There are many influencers, many of them, who are actually also escorts, luxury escorts, who are always in Dubai, who book trips there anyway. There are tons of them, obviously, but there are those who don't need to submit themselves to that, right? Because the foreign black pill channels, they're just as blunt when they talk to the normies and the unattractive guys from countries like the United States and England, because they say the following, brother: women have learned to make money without needing the state, without needing to work an 8-hour job, just with OnlyFans, with photo packs. So like, okay, not every woman is going to make 30, 50,000 reais a month with that, right? But any girl who knows how to work a bit on social media, hires some traffic services, has a nice body, goes to the gym, which is cheap, you can do it, follows a diet, etc. She just needs, I don't know, to get 100 subscribers, and OnlyFans costs about $12 on average. That's $1,200. Multiply that by 5, that's 6 grand a month. She's already making more than 92% of Brazilians. You get it? For her to do her own thing, eat her sushi, have gin with the owner, and her life is set. All she has to do is take a few sexy photos, which, by the way, they're already posting for free on Instagram, right? And they've realized they can make money from it, right? So this monetization through the body is just another biological way for women to take advantage of men because of how fragile we are. Like I said, nature made us to be weak, made us to be obsessed, made us to be crazy about the female body, and made women to be as uninterested as possible. Only in very specific periods or with really top tier guys, the kind Kuru already mentioned, do women even compete among themselves. And this is something that other creators have already noticed. Alita has already talked about this anyway. Women, TFM has even made a video about it. The only time women fight, the only time the female collective fights is when they're competing for that man in the top 1%, the genetic and social elite, you know? So what happens is that most of the time women are united, they help each other, promote each other, even if there's some friction. That thing with envy, talking behind each other's backs, fake female friendships and all that, setting aside those petty squabbles, those rough edges, those more marginal things. In general, the female collective is very united. So, and it turns out that they've realized that they can monetize this thing, that only they have what they want, their desire is to copulate. There are only a few days in the month, or maybe just one day in the month, they have this ability to wait. As the saying goes, they have a lot of patience, you know. They don't have the same need that we do, right? That's also because of testosterone and so on. After all, if nature hadn't made us the way we are, the human species would have already ended, because if a guy had really low libido, he wouldn't waste time with dating, marriage, all that stuff, you know? If the guy wouldn't do it, the human species would die out. So nature is smart. It wants species to survive, or for the fittest to survive. So it's something very hard to control. So women realize that this is just another way to have a relationship where they come out on top, because what does the guy get out of it? The guy who's paying $12, $30 sometimes for a premium package, I don't know what else. He's getting 6 seconds of pleasure through an act with his own hand, while the woman is eating at the best restaurants, paying for personal trainers, getting her hair washed only at beauty salons. So it's a deal that's very unfair, the exchange. And even if the guy did get access, hooked up with the girl, spent a night with her, in the end, he still loses out because of time, energy, the amount of vitamins and minerals lost through ejaculation, and so on. As much as we often think that we've won, we might not have lost badly, but we still lost, you know? So being really optimistic, sometimes you just break even. But honestly, sometimes you don't win at all. It's a game you play just not to lose, you know? So being a man is kind of like playing defensively, being an awakened man in this case, right? Unless you're a suicidal kamikaze, willing to take on someone else's kids and marry the first crazy woman who comes along, then fine. Then you go into kamikaze mode, which is what most men do, fine. But being an awakened man when it comes to women is about playing not to lose. You get it? It's that hardcore defense, like Mourinho's Chelsea in 2012. Really, right? Or like the teams coached by Mano Menezes or Carrile, it's total defense, you know? So there's not much you can do. So that's the situation. So you have this whole story about the internet, about female behavior, how we ended up with OnlyFans, and this is just one more way, after 2 million years of human evolution, that women have found to take advantage of their sensuality, and they know that we find them irresistible. However, you can use logic. You can be aware that when you see a very beautiful woman, in a few seconds your brain... Guilherme Vic has a really good video. I'll even leave it pinned in the comments, along with the Kiriga and Karuha channels, where he says that desire is a demon. For me, this video by Guilherme is one of the best videos in the community. It's really, 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 really good. He explains that almost every desire you have, whether it's the urge to eat a refined carbohydrate, to be with a woman, or to look at nonsense on the internet, passes much more quickly than we think, because we tend to underestimate our own ability to control our desires. So this is yet another way that women have found to work with our fragility, right? And that has this whole issue of evolution. So, for example, if you think about it, OnlyFans would have been unthinkable in 2004, for instance, or in 2007 at the height of Orkut, because society as a whole would judge women. And here, I'm not speaking from a feminist perspective or as a defender of women, nothing like that. No, it's just that in reality, they wouldn't be able to handle the judgment. They're still like that even today. Even in the sensual photos they post, they have to add a caption about empowerment and that every woman is free and so on. Because they can't just let things happen, they always have to justify themselves. I'm not just a body, I read books, right? I read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I know women read, and they say they're intelligent and whatever, that they're not just that, right? And a bunch of simps read that crap too. Well, yeah, right? You pick up a tip or two, but you think it's the same as reading Dostoevsky or, for example, Machado de Assis. I'm going to keep making these criticisms. Yeah, because It's not just me, but also Epifanio Cruz from Meta Metina, a bunch of fans from the group, and everyone who's active in our community. Some truths need to be told. So shall we move on to the final stretch of the video? Man, I really miss making videos longer than 25 minutes. Seriously, I missed it, but at the same time, I did not. The last 3 videos were under 25 minutes, but anyway, right, because they were more concise videos. Now that I have really loosened up here, look, I am even calmer. On Monday, I was nervous. I vented to you guys. I was really upset. On Monday itself, in the video I made about society being made to drive you crazy, but today I am much more chill. So pay attention to this. To understand the OnlyFans effect, you need to understand the chronology of the internet, from the mystery of Merc to the most innocent photos on Orkut, Fotolog, and Flowgown. At the same time, parallel to that, there was already a certain naughtiness between the genders. On MSN, it was more of an escape because of the webcam factor. Then, on Facebook, you already had photos that you wouldn't see on Orkut. And Instagram is the perfect opportunity that they saw, that they realized that they have access, at least for one night, to some very famous guy, some very handsome guy, some very rich guy, right? And then they noticed, hey, there are a lot of guys liking my photos. So if guys are giving me, why should I keep posting photos in a thong bikini, right? To get 2,000 likes, if I can actually hook up with the girl, we think women don't do this kind of math, that women aren't very exact or whatever, that they don't do these calculations. But actually, those who are really deluded, staying here on the internet, are the ones who do it the most, okay? They do the math, man. If just 5% out of 2,000 likes, that's 100 guys. If each one pays me $12 a month, I make 6 grand a month. If I can double that, then it's 12 grand. I hit 5 digits. So women are really smart about this. They realize they can monetize it without even having to get physically involved with a man, right? Because a lot of them can't, not everyone is going to manage that anyway. That's how it is. Men are always going to be losing out. There will always be more simps. Male thirst is infinite, and if we don't lose, that's already good enough. All right? A big hug to everyone out there.